Great, so now let's extend that error message failed to load the calendar so that it shows more valuable information for all the programmers out there if they would ever need to work on that problem. So inside of our program, let's switch to our global error handler, which we have right here. And now let's use the location strategy. This comes from Angular Common. So go ahead and import the location strategy. There we go. And we need to set up an object or an instance inside of the constructor. So let's do that. So private or field, sorry, location strategy of type location strategy. Great. So let's just move that line of code at the bottom because we want to write down some code right here. So let's set up in var error event equals to a new object. Now, for sure, this error event, this is just set up by us, right? So this type of object doesn't pre-exist. We are just creating a new object. You can very easily do that in TypeScript. So just as you would do it in JavaScript, you could just create, or in nearly every programming language out there, you can just go ahead and set up your own object, right? Or in other languages, yeah, you would call it a dictionary. So for the path, because we want to know where the error occurs, we use this .local strategy, so local strategy, right, .path. This is the important method here because it shows where the error has occurred, right? Now for the message, we again want to do exactly the same as we did before. We want to use error.message, but only if we have one. If not, we go ahead and set the error.toString. There we go. Great. So for the handler, we can say, just as an information, that the global error handler took responsibility of, well, showing the information and the error handling, right? So this is not important information right now, but you could just extend it for the programmer to see, okay, who handled that. So just think about the programmer which receives that error. He should have an easy time, right? So he should be very easily be able to find where the mistake's coming from, who handled the error, where did the error occur, and all of that. So we really want to submit this more important information, as much as important information as possible, right? So then for the user, we don't have a user ID, but we would potentially go ahead and make something like the ID of the current user, right? So if we would have a login system or something like that, then we would submit an email address maybe here or whatever. Maybe not an email address, it really depends, right? It could also be a session ID or something like that. So for time, we want to know when the error occurred, because right now in Mokoon we cannot see that. Or I'm not sure, let me open that up. I guess we can see it. Yeah, there we go. So there's a date here, right? But it's not part of the body, and we want to have that part of the body so we could so that we could send that information to somewhere else, and then the programmer would still be able to see in a report of logs. He could, well, process that and see the date of each single error. So for time, we select for sure the new time, so the current date when the error then occurs. And for the stack, we use the error.stack. So this is the stack trace, and it's inside of the error object, right? So the stack trace, you know that, so that you know which line of code has thrown the error. This is the so-called stack trace. Awesome. So, and again, instead of sending the error message here below in the post call, let me just get that here, we for sure now want to go ahead and submit our error event. And as I said, this is really a little bit more of advanced stuff, but that makes it really valuable as a program. If you know such things that, well, if you're a good programmer, you already know that logging information and that error handling and really like separating environment or environments, right, is very important. And hiding some messages from the user and instead bringing it to programmers for error messages, that definitely makes a lot of sense. Great, let's start the application again. Let me just hit F5 and then open up Mokoon. And you can see that we now have a /errors here again. And if you take a look, you can just scroll down. You can see body raw, and it's now really huge. We got a lot of information, which is quite good. You can also, well, open it up, right? You can click on view full body in editor, and you can now see path is set to /. This is because the URL, we have no endpoint here because this is our homepage, right? So the default starting page. So that's fine. The message is failed to load calendar, handler, global error handler. I mean, that was hard coded exactly as the user ID. Then we got the time, which is for sure the exact time when the error occurred. And then we have the very important information about the stack trace. So the error failed at ng on init at the calendar component, which is totally correct, because if we would now go there, open up our application, the programmer would be able to see, okay, it was like calendar component, right? And he would see, okay, ng on init, there we go, throw new error. So I was able to find the error, I would be able to find the error just by looking at the stack trace. And that's awesome. So even though another person, so not even you, right? So another person out there which is using your application is facing an error, and you get the information. And that's really, really important, because you know, data and information is the most valuable thing that we have as a programmer, right? So nearly all of our programs, we are writing programs to fetch data. We are writing programs to create invoices, which are also just data, right? So it's always about data. And especially if you're working on huge applications, which are really maybe something like IoT, so Internet of Things, where you have devices which are for your smart home or something like that, then you're really transferring a lot of data. And just now imagine you have like 10 devices in your home, right? So something maybe for shutting down the windows and maybe turning on the heat or whatever. Now, if those devices have errors, they don't have a display, they maybe can write it to a log, but if you want to see that errors, then you would go ahead and take all of the devices and plug it into your computer and then read the logs. That would be super bad, right? So instead of doing that, let's just assume that a company XYZ, let's call it like this, has those devices. Instead, they just have that logging server, right, based on their station in US, for example. And all of their devices which are spread around the world while they are connected with the internet and they face an error, the error gets sent to that station in US, so that the programmer then sees, all right, so yeah, we got a temperature issue for like all of the devices. So we need to change the program code and enroll a new software update which fixes that issue, right? And that would only, this is only possible because it confirms that every every new series of that specific device has that error, and that was just possible because he has seen that like once the new update got enrolled, all of these devices are thrown that error inside of the log server. So, and this is why it is so super important to really, well, log the information.